Welcome again to Horizontal Power Hour, your source for anarchist thought, culture, and politics. True to our politics, Horizontal Power Hour is planned and produced by a collective called the Dream Committee. While we're just beginning to construct and evolve our own processes for making decisions and for creating our show, we have a basic model we work under. At present, we're made up of 12 members of differing perspectives, backgrounds, and interests, and we share in the process of planning, producing, and broadcasting the show every other week. We meet regularly to discuss and evaluate our process and ensure that all decisions we make are considered by the entire group. We focus our attention on the process of our own group, both with the goal of eliminating hierarchy and coercion internally, and with the conviction that ultimately our politics are not about a distant, idyllic future, but about recreating the world around us right now.
On today's show, we'll be talking about activism in the Global South, or the Third World, as it's sometimes called. We'll be speaking to Caio Juca, an anarchist activist from Sao Paulo, Brazil, who works with the Ativismo ABC collective.
Next, we'll have an interview with Caio Juca of Ativismo ABC to talk about the anarchist movements that are currently working throughout South America. So we have Caio Juca with us. He's from Brazil. Caio, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to in the United States?
Sure. Well, I've been traveling around the U.S. for 2 months and a half now, probably. The main idea for the trip was to connect and with different collectives and anarchist groups in the U.S. and see what's going on over here and share some experiences. So I'm also doing discussions to the places that I've been to, showing pictures and different perspectives on our collective, Ativismo ABC, and how the anarchist movement in Brazil is reorganizing and restructuring towards something different and larger.
Great. So you're with Ativismo ABC.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us what that stands for, like what the meaning behind the name is, and what exactly you do? Okay.
The collective started like 8 or 9 years ago inside the People Global Action of São Paulo, mostly organizing protests global against WTO and free trade areas of America. And after a while, we decided we should act more locally back in the ABC region. So ABC region is made of 7 cities, which the main ones are Santander, which is the city that we have a space on, and São Bernardo do Campo, and São Caetano do Sul. So we call Ativismo ABC, mostly because it's an activist group from the ABC region. But the main idea, the Ativismo ABC name just came up as a mailing list, was not even a given name, so we just kept that. We have a space back in Santander, state of São Paulo, which we consider right now, like it's been active for 6 years and a half, maybe a little bit more. And we consider it to be like our lab to develop knowledge and know-how to build up relations that can bring us autonomy towards the state and the market. So we act locally. We support many other groups, many other spaces in São Paulo, also traveling around Brazil and Latin America. Other comrades actually travel a lot to Chile, Uruguay, Argentina, connecting to anarchist groups there too.
Great. So you're talking about connecting with other anarchist groups in the area. What is the anarchist scene like in Brazil?
Right now, I see a growth on the more specificist, paternalist anarchist groups in Brazil, which are the Anarchist Federation of São Paulo, which is pretty recent, and Anarchist Federation Rio, and Anarchist Federation of Rio Grande do Sul, which is Federação Anarquista Gaúcha. And I see those groups kind of growing in Brazil, so more into social movements and paternalist kind of anarchism. So they have other groups that they also support, and they are more attached to them in their political perspective. And we also have a growth on anarchist spaces around and occupied spaces too. But what we're trying to do now in our collective is put more theory into the idea of having a space and how we actually use our space as a political tool and not just a community space or just like a cultural space. We see it more as a political tool to reach more local organizations.
Great. What would you say are some of the biggest struggles or causes that you guys have been involved with your collective?
Well, our collective, we're running to the idea of agroecology and gardening, and at the same time getting back with good relations with MST, the Landless movement in Brazil. We have a strong connection with Ciclovida collective in northeast of Brazil. So they live they got a land through occupation in northeast of Brazil. They have strong anarchist perspectives inside rural areas. So what we were working on is it's bringing to the political perspective the idea of having a divided society, like into rural and urban areas, and how we can actually deal with that in a more revolutionary way. How can we sustain that division? Is it sustainable, or we have to work something else out? So mainly what we're trying to work on is getting back to Landless movement and using Ciclovida collective as a bridge, as a way to connect with rural areas and bring in different political perspectives or anarchist perspectives into the struggles for land.
Great. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Landless Workers Movement? Talk a little bit about what exactly they're up to, and specifically how your group has engaged with them.
Okay. So MST, the Landless Movement in Brazil, has been around since the 80s, and mostly they organize in order to get land. So they occupy, they organize themselves with people that are actually struggling for land and occupy land that are not being used and pressure the state to give them that land because it's not being used for any kind of purpose, just laying around. So they spread all over the country pretty much and to fight for land for the people. So they're kind of a huge movement, and they talk about like 1.5 million landless people working with them and occupying and getting land through the process of occupation. So the main thing that we try to work on as anarchists is try to work directly with people that in the land. And since MST has a sort of a strong hierarchical political structure, it's kind of hard to work with that structure and being anarchist. So the groups, like our group, our collective, and other collectives like Anarchist Federation of São Paulo and many others, we can actually overcome the idea of hierarchy working directly in those lands. So we don't go through the hierarchical structure of MST, which is pretty strong, and we got critiques towards that too. So mainly that, just identifying the lands and the people that actually don't like much the idea of hierarchical orders, and then we try to work with them directly.
Great. Now, how do these landless workers movements and other grassroots movements in Brazil, how do they feel about anarchism, and how do they feel about your anarchist group? What do they think about the word anarchism? Do they ever engage with any anarchist theory themselves?
Well, it depends on who you're actually working with, but most of them, they're more comfortable with the idea because of the MSC, with the idea of communism or socialism. But it depends on the land that you're working on. So really, it's kind of a vague idea of anarchism and anarchists. So what we try to do is just being present in order to have a different idea of anarchism and what we can do organizing by ourselves and through self-management too. So it depends a lot. They don't have like a formed idea of anarchists. It depends on the work that we do to give them a good background on it. So it's something, it's kind of new and pretty small too. We're not many anarchists in Brazil. So, and this process of being in touch with MSC is coming back right now. So hopefully in a short while we'll have more anarchist perspectives inside those lands.
And have you ever experienced any hostile reactions to your anarchism from any of these movements? Because I know in the United States sometimes anarchists aren't always seen in the best light. They're seen as privileged, or they're seen as kids that just want to wreck everything. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that from the people you work with.
Well, during the few years back, when we definitely get it. Since pretty much all anarchists they all come from urban life, and so it's hard to connect with people on the land if you're coming just from the urban areas and trying to organize with them. So the other thing that we're trying to work on, our collective is trying to work on right now, is just how not to be seen as outsiders, as people from the city going by to help out. So, and to work with Landless and with the land, in order to build up friendship or build relations, right? You can actually help out, but you will never be like their friends or have closer relations with them if you have a completely different life outside of that place. So what we've been building up through these years is just like how the garden that we have actually was responsible for bringing us enough knowledge and know-how on working with the land in order to go to any land and have a good conversation, not about politics or anarchism or organization, but about medicinal plants, about healthcare through using autonomy as a way to reach healthcare in a more autonomous way. So really sharing the things that actually live with the life that we have back in the city too. So the way to reach them is a way to also see how we live in the city and how we can actually use a bunch of strategies towards autonomy at the same time bringing a closer relationship with them. So if you go to the land, to a landless movement or a land, and you actually talk to them about the plants that they have, how they save their seeds, what kind of crops they grow, you actually will not be seen as an outsider anymore. You will be seen as a comrade, somebody that actually understands their lives. That's what we're trying to do in order to overcome that kind of relationship from the outside, as outsiders, and be more like a comrade.
That sounds great. Could you tell us a little bit more about your house? You live in A Casa da Lagartixa Preta. I don't know if I said that right. It means the House of the Black Lizard. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about the meaning behind that name and how you guys live in the house and how you think it fits with anarchist principles?
Okay. We don't actually live there. It's just a space that we have. It's a rented place. So we pay rent every month, but we try to live nearby as much as possible. And we sort of, during the years, we came with the idea and a political perspective of being inside the neighborhood and kind of taking over some spaces of the neighborhood. So right now we're trying to have a collective house nearby with 4 comrades from the collective renting a house to live in. So there's a bunch of things that go through the space and we use the space for. So One is seen as a space for, we have a community library. We do discussions every weekend in order to connect with other collectives from other parts of São Paulo or even around the world. We had many visitors and collectives from many different places of the world to come by and have discussions and try to build up alliances. So we also use the space as a place to be together, to build up good relationships and friendships inside the collective and with the neighborhood. So we're very known in the neighborhood. Check out the medicinal plants that we have, share traditional knowledge, which is something that we also interested in as a way to empower people through knowledge and traditional knowledge and practical background on daily lives, like know-how, building up kind of a know-how.
That's great. What is your personal perspective on the changes in government that have been happening in Latin America over the past few years? In the United States, we talk a lot about Hugo Chavez and Lula and his successor, Rousseff. I don't know, like, what is your perspective? What is the anarchist perspective on these governments in Latin America? Do you think they're a good thing for? Do you think they're a good thing for autonomous leftist movements, or a bad thing?
Well, it depends a lot. Lula also was kind of, when he reached the presidency of the country, many social movements lost a lot of power too, because a lot of the movements, people from PT, which was the Labor Party that Lula was part of, they were also into the social movement. So as soon as Lula reached the presidency, there was a kind of laying back and see what's going to happen, and some kind of hope. People were hoping that he was actually going to do something different, but he didn't at all. So at the same time, left in Brazil, specifically left-wing parties, just had a huge split inside the PT party, and kind of all the left-wing parties that were actually strong because of the PT party were kind of left behind, and they're still trying to come back with the same power that they used to have like 10 years ago. So at the same time, it's a way for anarchists, it's an opportunity for anarchists to grow, since left-wing parties always just gave us a hard time back on the 2002, 2001 during the protests, because we're trying to organize everything decentralized, and they will just come by at the day of the protest and with a bunch of flags, so the party's flags, and with trucks and sound system, and the leader is on top of it saying a bunch of things. So we don't have that anymore. So it's also an opportunity for anarchists to grow. And other governments in Latin America, I don't know. I don't see them as a positive or negative thing to anarchists. I don't think it actually matters to the point of how we organize and what we should actually be doing. It shouldn't change based on that. But still, we should work, no matter what, more into organizing, self-management, and more autonomous groups. But definitely it changes on left or right wing going to the government, but I don't see it. My personal view is just like, we just have to organize more and do more things, and having more presence into the social movement, and not relying much on political changes through vote or through the so-called democracy.
Great, thank you for that. So based on what you've encountered in the United States, how would you compare the anarchist movements that you've encountered in the United States to the anarchist movements that you're involved with in Brazil. What do you think about what you've seen of anarchism in the United States?
Well, I didn't see so far much of a difference between here and Brazil. Definitely, like it's easier here to have collective houses and co-ops, and definitely have a better structure for it. And I've seen a bunch of things going around that. And it actually just help out on collective strategies to deal with our daily lives, like paying less for rent so you can have more time or don't have to work as much to live in the city. And that's mainly the difference. But other than that, I don't see much differences. Like I think there's a lack of like connecting the local, more of a seeing spaces as a local way to organize and then connect to other groups through a larger organization. What I see is just like people trying to have spaces with no organizational larger ideas, or groups organizing with no local local base. So it's pretty much the same in Brazil. We got more kind of a growth on the organizational and theoretical anarchists, but at the same time we got some spaces going, but they're not connected. They're not being like seen as one political strategy as a whole thing. So I don't know. I learned a bunch about like collective houses and how it works, but at the same time, I don't know if we can actually multiply it in Brazil in a different financial structure that we have. So, well, what I see is pretty much the same that I see in Brazil, not just, but in the U.S. there's definitely a lot more anarchists than in Brazil.
Wow, that's really interesting. What do you hope to see in the near future of anarchist activism in Brazil or in the U.S.?
Well, what we're working on in the collective is writing down our theories on organizations and actually how to bridge the organizational perspective and the local organizations organizing that we have. So what we're trying to do is to have a more solid and more strategical anarchist movement. We have the main idea is just to have a organizational strategy in order to like take steps forward, and not just having a bunch of things laying around. At the same time, we don't know what to do with all of that. So what we're trying to write down right now is how we can have spaces not being used just as community space or cultural centers, but as a way to organize locally and build up new relationships with people living around it, and then trying to connect with more people doing that in order to form a larger organization, but mostly based on daily life struggles and works on organizing, rather than just organize a bunch of different structures with no practical or daily based background. So what I hope to see in the future is a more solid and taking steps forward into an anarchist society, building up a different society, a more solid, based on friendship and solid relations. So I don't know. It's pretty much what I would like to see. It's bridging the organizational with the local work and sharing, also trying to use other, as an anthropological perspective, trying to see how other human cultures actually had relations that we could relate to anarchist relations, and how we can try to multiply that, or using the spaces, the local organizing or local presence that we have in order to to an anarchist or more free society.
Well, that's great. You were talking about the need for more organization and theory in the anarchist movement. Do you guys have any particular inspirations in terms of models or theories of an anarchist society?
Well, we have pretty much a practical background with our space, but we also have a big influence on using anthropology as a background too. So we kind of try to use the space as a way to change, to work on different relations in order to build up friendship and see how anarchism can actually be more related to our daily lives, and at the same time not being lifestyle or isolated. So we definitely have a strong influence from anthropology studies, and but most of the ideas that we're writing down are mostly based on our practical background at the space, and also traveling around Brazil and Latin America and getting in touch with different groups. So that's pretty much our background to write down theories.
Well, thanks so much, Caio. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and we have to cut the interview short. Just a reminder, Caio Juca, that's who you were hearing. He's from the Ativismo ABC collective. You could check him out on the internet. Just Google Ativismo ABC.
Also, I just thought you should mention, it's in Portuguese, and in case you can't read Portuguese, if you type in the website to the page, you can, there's a little translate button next to it. You can click it and translate it to your language.
You're listening to WESU-Middletown, 88.1 FM, all the way to the left on your dial. And this is Horizontal Power Hour, your source for anarchist thought, culture, and politics.